Hi, this is the video for Daf Shevui. We are learning Masechet Avodah Zarah. We are on Daf Tetvav, page 15. I am Joshua Kulp. And I wanted to comment on a couple lines that appear towards the bottom of Daf Tetvav, page 15, the second side. Throughout all of these dapim, we hear a lot of very harsh attitudes towards non-Jews. They're accused or at least suspected of being murderers, of being engaged in bestiality, and all sorts of a host of terrible moral crimes and crimes against society. It kind of sometimes begins to feel genetic almost. In essence, that the moral stain on being a Gentile is there whether or not one actually is moral or not. All Gentiles are included in these prohibitions. And I want to admit that there are places in the Gemara that lend towards that genealogical, if you want to call it racist, way of looking at the world, that a person's moral character depends not on their actual actions, but on the families to which they belong, the ethnic groups to which they belong. It's obviously not an ideology that I personally ascribe to, but I will admit that there are parts of the Talmud and the Jewish tradition, and I imagine everybody feels that way about all traditions, is that there are parts of their tradition that resonate and that which in their minds and with which they agree, and there are parts which no longer fit their modern moral sensibilities, and we have to try to cope with them and work them out of our own system, and I think Judaism has largely done that. But there is one point in the Gemara that I think takes a different tone, and that's where Rav Dimi bar Abba says, "Kederach she'asor limkor legoy," just as it's prohibited to sell weapons, we're speaking about here, asor limkor lelistim Yisrael. It's also prohibited to sell to a Jew who is a robber, who is a thief, because he may use those weapons violently. And there we can see the concept that it's not a genetic issue, it's not genealogical, it's not that it's prohibited to sell to a goy because he's a goy. It's prohibited to sell to a goy because we assume that he's violent, and there are violent Jews as well, and just as it's forbidden to sell to violent non-Jews, it's also forbidden to sell to violent Jews. And the Gemara in essence says that if he's suspected of being a murderer, pshita, Hainu goy, it's the same exact thing. It has the same rules as a non-Jew. And then they ask the question, if he's not a murderer, then why shouldn't you sell him weapons? And they note that all robbers may end up committing murder because they may be surprised. I don't want to talk about robbery, but really this line, if he's a murderer, if he's killer, then that's just like being a Gentile. I don't think that they're saying here that all Gentiles are murderers. I think that they're saying that all Gentiles here are assumed of being a murderer, but that the problem with being a goy, according to this text, is not inherent to one's genes, but is inherent to one's actions. And I think at least this text, if you pushed it a little further, could imagine a world in which the non-Jew that the Jew knows is not like the non-Jew in the Talmud. And indeed, later in Jewish history, the Meiri, a Provençal Rishon, early commentator, indeed did that. He said the types of non-Jews that the Gemara was referring to are not the types of non-Jews that we have now. They're basically, the Gemara is referring to barbarians. Today we have law-abiding citizens, and therefore all of the rules of the Talmud do not apply, or at least many of the rules of the Talmud do not apply to the non-Jews that we know today because they're categorically different. It's something to think about. I don't know if the Meiri, this interpretation, is the simple reading of the Talmud, but it's certainly a viable and I think appealing reading of the Talmud.